Hi, welcome to Unit 1 Scientific Skills and Matter Day 2 video. During this video, you will be asked some CFU or check for understanding questions, and you need to pause it when necessary to take notes. We have three objectives today. The first is to define matter, atoms, and molecules. The second is to describe phases of matter, and the third is to define the classifications of matter. Let's start off with defining matter and the three phases of matter. So, why are we talking about matter? That is because this is chemistry, and chemistry is the study of matter. Matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. Make sure you capture this definition down on your handout. Chemists study matter by observing chemical and physical changes in the matter and measuring chemical and physical properties. They take that data, analyze it, and then they can draw conclusions, which allows chemists to make predictions about matter. So a good way of understanding something is by not only looking at examples of the thing that you're studying, but looking at non-examples. And we're going to do that with matter, so we have a strong understanding of what something is, what's matter and something that's not. So an example of matter would be a lamp. And the reason why the lamp is an example of matter is because you can weigh it, it has mass, and it also takes up space or occupies space, so it has volume. However, the light from the lamp is a non-example of matter because you can't weigh it. You can't weigh light, and it doesn't occupy space. Air is also an example of matter, and a lot of times people don't think about that because air appears as nothing. But the way we know air is an example of matter, if you blow up a balloon, what happens to the balloon? Does it stay that size or does it get larger? It gets larger, so that's telling you that the air is actually taking up space. It has volume. And you can also weigh air. If you have a really powerful scale, you can weigh air. Air has mass as well. So air is an example of matter. A non-example of matter would be wind, because wind is the movement of air. It's not the matter itself, it's just the movement. So wind would be a non-example. All right, try this CFU. So what we want to know is what's the example and what's the non-example of matter. Is the heat from the campfire an example or non-example of matter? Or is the wood from the campfire an example or non-example of matter? And also be able to explain it. So pause the video now, and when you press play again, the answer will be revealed. All right, what is an example of matter? That's because you can weigh it, you can measure its volume, and we'll see later that wood is made up of atoms and all matter is made up of atoms. The heat, on the other hand, is a non-example because you cannot weigh it, you cannot measure its volume, and heat is not made of atoms. All right, there are three phases of matter, and you probably have seen these before: solid, liquid, and gases. So on your handout, you have this section here. What you're going to do is you're going to draw in the particle diagram for the solid, liquid, and gas. And when I say about particle diagrams, I mean these circles that are shown in solid, liquid, and gas. You only need to use about maybe 4 to 6 circles. You don't need to use all that are shown here. But the main thing is that if you notice for the solid, the circles or the particles are close together and they're arranged uniformly, meaning that they're arranged in these columns and rows. So solids have that, because of that quality, solids are rigid. They have a fixed shape, meaning they keep whatever shape they have, no matter what shape the container you put them in. And they also keep their volume. They have a fixed volume as well. Liquid particles, on the other hand, they're close, but they're not as close as solids. And they're not arranged uniformly. They're arranged sort of randomly. Another thing about liquid particles, they actually can flow over one another. So because they can flow over one another, you're able to pour a liquid, and liquids take on the shape of the container that they're in. So liquids do not have a fixed shape, but they do have a fixed volume. Whatever the volume is that you start off with a liquid, you will end up with that same volume, no matter what container you put it in. And finally, we have gases. Gases are not rigid. The particles are very far apart and they move very quickly in all directions. and they occupy the entire container. So gases do not have a fixed shape, nor do they have a fixed volume. All right, so make sure you get this information down on your handout, the particle diagram, solid, liquid, and gas. Ask me if you have any questions about that. All right, the next section that we're going to go to is our atoms. So we're talking about matter, and the reason why atoms are important is because atoms are the building blocks of matter. And as they say, never trust an atom because they make up everything. So you may be thinking basic building block, what exactly does that mean? One way to think about it is if you take a gold bar and you divide it in half, and you just keep cutting it in half until you can't cut it anymore, what you'll have left is an atom of gold. And what makes that an atom of gold? Well, it still retains some of the properties or characteristics of the gold bar, but you can't divide it anymore. And if you divided it further, it would no longer retain those characteristics or properties. Now, there are 118 different types of atoms, which you can find on the periodic table of elements. And here are a few of them. The first element on the periodic table is hydrogen. So the second one is helium. Oxygen is the 8th. Sodium is the 11th. Chlorine is the 17th. Copper is the 29th, and gold is the 79th. So these are all these different types of atoms. There are many more that we didn't look at here. But these atoms can connect or bind together to form what are known as molecules. And molecules are made up of two or more atoms bound or connected together. Make sure you get this definition down for molecules on your handout. An example of a molecule will be water. So a good way to think about this is by breaking down the matter. If we start off with a bulk sample of water, which is like a glass of water, and it's typically how we experience matter on the bulk end, which are a lot of molecules and atoms. If we were to zoom in, we would see all those molecules and atoms. There will be a ton of them. And if we were to pick out one of those molecules, one H2O molecule, we could then break that apart, break those bonds connecting the atoms, and see that we have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. I just want to point out that the chemical formula of water, H2O, so that's called the chemical formula, tells you how many atoms you have in the molecule. So that little subscript there, 2, tells you have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So you can either draw a diagram of water, the structural formula of water, or you can use the chemical formula, and both will tell you how many atoms you have. Okay, the next part will be classifying matter, so that will be the next video.